Hello, English learners! I hope you are all well. Welcome to the channel that helps you to learn idiomatic phrases, phrasal verbs, everyday phrases through stories. That unique way that we learn as human beings. And of course, I use only natural English. It's not scripted. It's everyday English. And today, I want to tell you the story of someone whose story has maybe been lost. It's been lost in time. It's been lost in space. It's been lost in time. I want to tell you the story of the woman, or the Irish woman, who shot Mussolini. So every now and then a story explodes in the world. It ends up on everyone's lips. Everyone's talking about it. And this is one of those stories. Violet came from a well-off family. Well-off is a wealthy family, a family with money, with power. She probably came from the wealthiest, most well-off family in Ireland at that time. Her father was the governor of Ireland. Which is like the Prime Minister of Ireland, though Ireland was under British rule at the time. So many families like Violet's at that time in Ireland would have been described as Anglo-Irish, meaning that they had strong ties with Britain, they had strong ties with the British government, with the British monarchy. You could say they weren't very Irish. But Violet Gibson is different. Her and her brother are different. She actually converts to Roman Catholicism. She becomes a Catholic, where most Anglo-Irish people would have been C of E. They would have belonged to the Church of England. They would have been Protestants. Violet was also a very passionate person. And not only identifying strongly with Ireland, but she also loved Italy, and she had a great passion for Italy. She may have even spoken some Italian. We also know that Violet was spending time living in London, and we know that she lived in bohemian communities, communities that were maybe on the edge of society, not really like where her family came from. So she was a bit of a rebel. She was definitely a rebel. And maybe she was an outcast in her family, potentially. But she would have been exposed to a lot of modern thinking at the time, to a lot of new thoughts on injustices and poverty in the world. And so it seems that Violet went from being very, very passionate about justice and fighting against the injustices of the world to stepping over a line, you might say, stepping over a line, meaning going from one feeling to a much, much stronger feeling, where we can say she may have become radicalized, where she was willing to sacrifice herself for what she believed to be the right thing to do. And the right thing for her to do seemed to be that Mussolini must die. Fun fact, there were 4 attempts on Mussolini's life. Attempts meaning attempts to assassinate Mussolini. So there were 4 attempts on his life. Yet it's said that Violet was the one who came closest to succeeding. She moved to Italy, I think in 1925. And she somehow acquired a gun, as you do. We must remember at this point, Violet Gibson she's actually 50 years of age. She's not a spring chicken. She's not a young person. She's not a spring chicken. And she somehow acquires a gun, and She goes to Rome, where she obviously knows Mussolini is often speaking. He does public speeches. He's famous for doing public speeches. And she goes to assassinate him. What really interests me, though, about this story is that only 2 years into Mussolini's government, by the mid-1920s, he was already a despised figure in the world. People hated him passionately. She believes, obviously, that he is going to bring great damage to the world. He's going to bring great injustice to the world. So Violet has taken it upon herself to spare the world, to save the world from Mussolini. And it is in 1926 where she finally comes across, where she finds Mussolini. She comes across Mussolini, who is doing a speech in a square in Rome, and he's surrounded by his supporters. Surrounded by his supporters, which were often called the black shirts. So he's surrounded by his passionate supporters. They're listening to him. And it is at that moment that Violet makes her way through the crowd. So makes her way through the crowd. She moves through the crowd, makes her way through the crowd. And when she gets close enough to Mussolini, she takes out her gun and she points at him and fires. And just at that moment, Mussolini jerks his head. His attention is taken by something, and he jerks his head, and Violet's bullet just grazes his nose. Violet attempts to fire again, but the bullet gets jammed inside her gun. And it's at that point that the mob that have gathered to hear Mussolini speak, they pounce on Violet, they jump on Violet, and they start to attack her and pull her to the ground. And luckily for Violet, the police come and they arrest her. They save her from the mob and they arrest her and take her away. It is said that Mussolini simply puts a plaster over his nose, and he reappeared in public again later that day, while Violet, our hero, ends up being taken away by the police and spends some time in prison in Italy. And at the same time, her story explodes across Europe. Everyone finds out about the 50-year-old Irish lady who tried to kill Mussolini. But after a lot of back and forth between the British government and Mussolini's government in Italy, Violet is eventually allowed to return to the UK in her family's care. But when Violet got back to the UK, her family had different ideas. They wanted to hide the embarrassment in their family. They wanted to brush the problem under the carpet. They wanted to get rid of this embarrassment in their family. And they had a doctor section her. And section meaning to have her taken away to an asylum against her will. Violet would plead for many, many years, all of the rest of her life, actually. She would plead to be set free from the asylum. She apparently wrote many, many, many letters asking for her freedom. Apparently, few of those letters ever reached the person they were meant to be read by. And so Violet Gibson would spend the rest of her life, which was 29 years, in the asylum, and she would die 9 years after Mussolini's death. So there you are, the story of the Irish woman who shot Mussolini. A little bit sad at times, I know, but some of the best stories are, unfortunately. Until next time, see ya.